Welcome back to the channel. This is another book review. Today we'll be looking at Lawrence Kane's Martial Arts Instruction. Now, I can tell you, if you've been reading martial arts books for any length of time, you have read some Lawrence Kane books. Man is everywhere. He writes everything. He's pretty well respected. I've never met him. I would like to. So Lawrence Kane, if you're listening, give me a call. I recently went into a used bookstore locally, and you go to the martial arts section. You look around. Especially the used bookstores, you've probably seen all of the books a lot of the times. This time I saw, just sitting there on the shelf, wait a minute, martial arts instruction, that's literally my favorite topic. And Lawrence Kane, I've read some of his stuff. I like this guy. How had I never read this book before? It's from 1997. It's been around a long time. I think there's a newer, updated edition. I got the used one at the used bookstore from 1997. There's some gems in here. I personally am very drawn toward a Galileo quote that he used in here. According to the book, Galileo said, "You cannot teach a man anything. You can only help him discover it within himself." That is the most ecological dynamics concept there is. John Wooden, the famous basketball coach at UCLA, had said, "You haven't taught until they've learned." Again, putting the emphasis back on the learner. Sounds like Galileo was doing it way before him, and Lawrence Kane is bringing it forth to us here as well. He devotes an entire section of the book to using the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the MBTI. Now, among those, there is an extroversion segment of the types. Those folks are going to really enjoy talking with others, being physically engaged, being a social part of their environment. On the other side of that is going to be introversion, and they're going to be a little bit more reflective. They'll enjoy that meditation section. They're going to process a lot of this internally, while the extrovert, who maybe on the other side, is processing everything out loud, talking it through, trying to be a part of the group. Another type is the sensing. These folks, they're going to thrive with really clear details. Like we use our Shingitai model for teaching kata. That's their lens already. Whereas somebody else, an intuition type, is going to enjoy an open framework and do really original, really creative work on their own. They're going to thrive in an ecological dynamics, constraints-led approach. Folks who are thinking types are going to really handle clear, logical, systemic work. On the other side of this is the feeling. The feeling folks, they're dealing with the emotions. For us, of course, each of the kamae have associated feelings, emotions. We say kimochi, or the kokoro part of the training. And in that way, they're going to thrive. And finally, the last pair, looking at judging, is going to be a little bit more clear, organized. They want an orderly understanding of what the expectations are. Whereas a perceiving preference is going to have that desire for flexibility to just allow themselves to follow their curiosity and see where it takes them. The author here, Lawrence Kane, is a little bit more, he's suggesting that we look at those first four, the top pair and the second pair, extroversion to introversion, and sensing to intuition. And using those as, if you're not going to master the system and learn all 16, focus there, and you'll get a good sense of what those students need and how to cater to them. Importantly, he brings up the idea that a student who is maybe not behaving the way you think is appropriate in class is behaving appropriately for them. They're trying to learn that way. So maybe they're, in their own way, asking for your attention to be directed differently, for the lesson to follow a different pattern. And that's how they're going to thrive. I really respect what Lawrence Kane is doing here, suggesting that we, as instructors, look at students and cater to their needs to make the classes better. It can be demanding, but it's worth it. His version of lesson planning, it's different from ours, but I really like what he did here. He has a 4-part approach. The first part is planning. Now, we have a whole course on lesson planning, and if you've never gone through a formal training in lesson planning, it's going to be very beneficial to you. Please take a look at that. Once you've developed that plan, though, one of the segments in lesson planning is the implementation. For Lawrence Kane, after you plan, you do. And that is the implementation of that plan. You try the model you're going to teach the kata, you try the games, or you try the challenges, or you try the explanations, you try whatever it is that you planned. And now you go to the next phase, you want to check to see, is it working? Is my model meeting the needs of the class? Are the students thriving? Are they doing the things that you expected? What troubles are they running into? In that checking phase is the magic, where you see what has to happen to alter it to make it a little better for them. And ideally, for the future, you want to maybe change that plan a little bit. That last phase after you've run a check is to take action again, act again, and reinvent that plan. Take a new tack, take a new direction. Consider re-planning. So it's a cyclical idea. If you've read any of Rob Gray's books on ecological dynamics as it applies to sport or as it applies to skill acquisition, you've heard him say, or you've read him say, that what matters is what you do next. And this is it. As a coach, it doesn't matter how good your plan was on paper. What really matters is how well it impacts the class, how each athlete, how each student is doing. So you have to see what challenges they're facing, what Lawrence Kane would say is the check phase, and then re-implement some new approach. Or maybe it's the approach that you had in mind. Maybe your lesson plan anticipated that if you did a really good job in planning. I'm going to call out where he goes a little traditional without really calling it out here. He has one segment where he discusses balancing the realism of effective, dangerous martial arts training with the safety, the fun, the enjoyment, the careful planning that has to go into making sure everyone gets to come back the next day uninjured. Let's take a look at that from a painting drawn by Manaka Sensei for me when I was an instructor in the Jinenkan, just as he used the same character and painting by Hatsumi Sensei given to him for his dojo. We start from right to left. Chi Hayaburu Kami no Oshie wa, the spirit they're teaching toward us, Tokoshi ni Tadashiki Kokoro, forever be correct in spirit, Mi o Mamoru-ran, and body and protecting those things. And what we all say together, Chi in Harimitsu Daikon-myo. I want to be very careful about looking at the middle of that, the Tadashiki Kokoro Mi o Mamoru-ran. This is what we're going to pay attention to. So let's make it a little bit clearer, a little less artwork in the background, a little bit more legible for our study. This is what Lawrence Kane was referencing in that section of the book. We see the beginning, the tadashiki, the correctness. Now, referencing the oshie wa, the teachings in martial art, that's correct techniques are dangerous. So we must consider the kokoro, the spirit, the emotion, the mind, and the mi, the body, the physical body. O is a Japanese grammar term referencing what had come before, in this case, tadashiki kokoro mi, the correctness and the spirit and the body. O Mamoru-ran is the protecting, the preservation of those items. So let's look at that one more time, front to back. We're going to be in the context of correct technique. We're going to protect and preserve our mind, spirit, and body. Tadashiki kokoro mi o Mamoru-ran. By putting those together, it's a real challenge. It's a real balancing act to make sure that you get safety with realism. And Lawrence Kane calls that out quite intelligently here. If you have already taken our course on lesson planning, you know that we agree with Lawrence Kane on the idea of applying the Pareto principle. He doesn't call it out, but the 80-20 rule. We know that there are some absolute star athletes that just don't need almost anything from you. They could watch YouTube and get darn good at this stuff. There's another group at the end of the spectrum that either they're not applying themselves to it fully just yet, or they haven't decided to keep training hard. They're not taking it really to heart yet. They're going to be hard to reach, no matter how good an instructor you are, no matter how good your lesson planning is. That middle group can really thrive if they get a well-planned, well-executed lesson that takes into account their needs. According to Lawrence Kane, it would be the Myers-Briggs model of finding how that particular set of students needs to learn. Now, if you've taken our warm-ups course, you know that we disagree wholeheartedly with what he thinks are the important parts of warm-ups. Now, we do agree that warm-ups are part of getting your body, your joints, your muscles ready for action a little bit more intently than you probably were when you showed up to class. But we don't see it eye to eye at all on what the important factors are and how to get there. A couple of sections in here we disagree with a lot, like the idea that students are taught to practice repetitively and realistically. When real danger arises, pre-programmed responses can take over. We clearly don't think that's how that works. Now, he gets into a section that he doesn't call out as Shu-Ha-Ri, the traditional Japanese model of learning or skill acquisition. But here we see that, traditional instruction in Asian martial arts relies heavily upon modeling relationships, where students observe and attempt to imitate their sensei's techniques. We would call that Shu, Momoru, the preservation phase. He sees later, cooperative and independent performance sets in motion a trial and error process, through which students develop a better understanding of which techniques are most effective for their unique physical attributes and abilities. Now, we look at that and we say, that's the individual constraints. We're going to manipulate the individual task and environmental constraints in the constraints-led approach. We also look at that as a way to break apart and study kata, or techniques, and that's the ha phase of Shu-Ha-Ri. And then finally, by teaching others via role reversal, students internalize the materials taught and develop even deeper understanding. He doesn't quite call it out there, but that would be the release, so that you're starting to make it your own. That's the ri of Shu-Ha-Ri, that release phase. While we agree on some parts, disagree on other parts, I hope you'll take a look at our lesson planning and our warm-ups courses if you want to dive deeper into the why we have those disagreements. But pick up this book. I think you'll really enjoy it and benefit from it. It belongs on your shelf if you're a martial arts instructor or want to be one.